Okay, so my name is Ogemdi Anika, and currently a PhD student at the Institute of Energy and Sustainable Development. I'm carrying out a PhD research work in energy and sustainable development. I'm actually this September is going to be the last month of my second year. First October, I'll be starting officially my first year and my third year PhD journey here at the Montfort University, and it's been really an awesome experience this past 2 years.
So what did inspire you to pursue this career?
Yes, this question is something that every time people ask me, kind of bring memories, memories that are bitter and sweet per se, in the sense that I remember growing up in Nigeria, one of the most populous or in population in Africa, and somehow the percentage of people who can't really have access to basic amenities such as energy, such as even education, such as even light to even read. When I was growing up, it's so bad that we use candle lights to study for examinations, and it's it's made me really angry with my society, made me angry with my community, made me angry with my leaders who I feel have the power with all the resources we have in Nigeria to actually make at least these basic amenities available to the populace, but fail to do so. Maybe out of lack of political will to do the right thing, or maybe just plainly corruption. So as a result, I always just had this small idea in my mind of trying to change the world or change my community by anything. And I kept on looking for ways, and I found out that science, you know, is one way someone can actually try to do something that your governments don't want to do for your community. And then that's why I started, studying. I was really very studious growing up to the point that I remember I'll be reading with candlelight. My parents will not want to sleep because they're scared that I may sleep off, and, the candle is going to burn off the house. So they just keep video because they like the fact that I was very curious and interested in studying, and they just give me that support by staying awake, even though they just have to try their best and go back to work with the limited resources they had to train us. Oh, my parents, I'm from Africa. And my parents have 10 of us. So you can imagine, and every one of us, they struggled so hard to make sure we go to school, because it's not like what you expect in the Western world where you can take student loan and go to school. If your parents can't afford to send you to school, then you just can't go to school. And my parents did their best to send us to public schools that, you just pay a little bit of, as not as much as what is paid in private schools. So I didn't want their effort to be wasted. So I tried my best to study as much as I could. And I decided that I was going to do sciences and use science to kind of change the world. And I found out as I continued climbing, found out that if I could use what I've learned through my undergrad, even through my master's, I could actually do something in the world of renewable energy. And it could help, because that was one of the things that really hurt me the most, that we couldn't have constant access to power supply. So I felt I could do something that would contribute to knowledge and somehow go back home and implement it if the government will actually let you. But if not, I could just start up something that could help me raise the funds to do something in my local community that could, make the government see that something can be done by just an individual, and then maybe they could just come in and maybe contribute. But that's been my motivation, the anger that basic amenities wasn't available to me growing up. And we have a country that produces crude oil, and yet we cannot actually provide energy for her citizens. So that's one of the things that pushed me, and is still pushing me to today.
So, given the situation that you have experienced, um, do you think that your career, in that sense, as a woman, has been influenced by that or has been different?
Oh yes, like I said, my parents were hard workers, but in Africa, if you work so hard, it doesn't mean you're going to earn so much. They worked so hard to make sure they put food on the table for 10 of us and to make sure 10 of us go to school. And as a result, they couldn't, they just tried to make sure they paid the school fees, but couldn't buy me textbooks, couldn't buy my siblings textbooks. So it was really a struggle for me because I had to compete with people who had all the textbooks, all the equipment, everything that they need when school needs to go for an excursion to a place that is the students that will give the students good perspective about what they've been teaching them in the blackboard, or back then it was blackboard before we can say whiteboard now. My parents couldn't afford it, and they would try to just let us understand that they are trying but couldn't really afford it. So I lacked textbooks that aid learning, and it's actually influenced a lot. But in the end, it made me to, when I'm able to borrow textbooks from my classmates who let me go home with it, but at least they will let you use their textbooks while you're in school. I took my break time seriously and I used it so well, judiciously. So I would say yes, it impacted me because I came from a background that wasn't really financially strong. So that influenced my access to educational material. But that also motivated me to try to use as much as I can get within the short space of time that I could have access to it. So that actually impacted on my what's it called now, my educational pursuit, but somehow still served as a platform for motivating me to want to get to that stage where I don't need to struggle to buy basic things that I need to support my education.
What about nowadays? Do you still think that there's some bias for you as a woman? It does affect your work nowadays.
Okay, as a woman.
Yeah.
Oh yes. I'm going to say this because it's actually from where I'm coming from. They believe that at a certain age, especially once a lady has crossed 30, you should they'll tell you prioritize, as if you haven't gotten married at a certain stage and you're still pursuing education. Because I remember when I was about coming to the UK for my PhD, I got all the aunties, so worried and like, why you putting education as the primary thing? Stay back in Nigeria so that you can, focus on getting married and then having kids. The biological clock is ticking and all that. I was like, if of course I shouldn't pause my vision and my goals and aspiration, just put it on hold. Once if marriage comes, beautiful, of course, I would gladly accept it. But you shouldn't tell me to just let go of my vision, my ambition, and my aspiration and just put it on pause until I get married before I just go ahead and continue. It was really a tug of war that I had to, just for my own mental health, I had to just kind of stay away from those aunties in court who were just always, you want to just go PhD, you know how long it's very intensive, you won't have time to date, you won't have to. I was like, I just had to. So that bias is there. They just believe that there are guys who are more than even 40 who haven't actually married but are still chasing their careers. No, that pressure isn't on them. But for women, especially from Africa, where I come from, age is one thing that they use in pressuring women, and it has discouraged a lot of people who have so much ambitions too, like myself, from pursuing, because they just want to, please their parents who don't want to have that hear anything. Get married before you go to do something else. But I'm happy that it's actually, I didn't let that get to me, because I know it got to a lot of people, a lot of friends back home.
So, in relation to this, do you think that has been a major change in this sense when it comes to women in science or women pursuing their careers? Since the past, for example, to today?
Of course, I would say that there has been a huge change. Though, there are a lot of limitations because if I say there has not been, because I remember if you read back into history, there are times when women are not even allowed to study. So those who are really prudent and studious sneak out to the library to go and read, or even sneak out books and hide to do that. So these days, at least there's still that freedom for you to actually study and do what you want to do. But the only challenge I see is like for me, like I still say, I always make reference to my background, is the fact that access, simple access to education is I'm going to just tell it as it is. Growing up, public schools are the only thing that the majority of Nigerian parents can send their kids to. But these public schools are not taken care of. They're not funded. They're not given enough teachers. They're not even the teachers are not being paid well to remain as teachers in that place. So they go for private. They go get employment in private schools rather than coming to the public school. So you just find out that one teacher has to teach almost all the subjects in the school because they have limited supply of teachers in public school. So with that, a child that is really studious and smart will not, you won't be able to get the best of that, the potential in that child who goes to a public school. And also, public schools, like I said, aren't funded. I remember when I was actually running my MSc research back home in Nigeria, we had lack of what's it called now, equipment. So I couldn't do, in fact, to the point that I had to. I was advised it's not better you just change your topic now, instead of, because there's no school. I wrote to almost all the major schools that were in Nigeria to find out if they had that. They didn't have the equipment, so I had to try to take loan because then I was already working. So I was able to take loan to actually take the samples outside of Nigeria to do it. So it's actually a big challenge till date because many people I knew, we were like about 7 girls in that class that did a master's, but in the end, many of them changed their topics. They just changed and did something entirely that wasn't they weren't even passionate about. Why? Because they felt they couldn't, foot the bills for carrying their research. That's the same thing. We lack what's it called now? Adequate access. So you see a little girl who can code but doesn't have a computer, doesn't even have light. Even if there's a computer, doesn't even have light to power the computer. So these things are still the things that are limiting lots of girl children into education. Aside that, many ladies that are actually, that's why you notice that in the workforce, you find out that yes, many ladies study at these days are now studying STEM courses. But once they get married and start giving birth, I will always go back to where I come from. Because our healthcare system isn't really funded, I'll still say that. You find out that a woman puts to bed who was very active and her work life is very active, but she puts to bed. I have a friend who suffered that, put to bed and had lots of complications. And since then, it has affected her mental health, affected her physical health. She can walk from here to here without sitting down, needing to sit down. So these are some of the things that make women who actually study STEM courses not to be able to compete favorably in the employment or in the work field. Why? Because once they get married and they start putting to birth, they get complications that's related to childbirth as a result of poor health facilities that are available, at least where I come from. And these are the things that kind of make them, stay behind. And I know how good they were, like how excellent these ladies were. But because of these limitations, their peers who are male just always go ahead of them in the workforce. When they're promoting, when they're sending people abroad to go do more further training, they don't send them because every time they are always taking sick leave and all that. So these are some of the things that affect the girl child participation, not just in the school level, but also even in the workforce. So I think there are other reasons anyway, but these are just a few I'd like to just pinpoint.
Okay, it's interesting that you mentioned this because my next question is very related to this. So, it's more general, but um, in continents like Europe and America, I'm not sure about Asia and Africa. We have seen in the last 20, 30 years that there are more women succeeding in the education system and more women in universities, but when it comes to STEM subjects at universities, there's way less women than men in these subjects. Um, Whereas in other careers it's different or more even. What you think that is happening?
I think it's lack of role models. So lack of role models. So when a girl child, because I remember one of the people who made me to kind of want to like go ahead, no matter how hard my background is or where I'm coming from or the situation around me, was just one teacher that just walked in one day. You could see the passion in her. You could see the way she was teaching. She was giving her all. She wanted you to understand that studying this course is not just a routine. It's something you can become passionate about. So the way she was teaching, I just had, as a girl, I just felt I want to be like this woman. So there are very few women, especially in Africa, because I don't have, I've just spent 2 years in Europe. So my experience and everything I say in this interview has to be based on my background. So there are very few women who are actually teaching these STEM courses who can actually serve as role models for these young ones to, tell themselves, I want to be like this woman. I want to be like this woman. And the few of them that are available, they are not being even encouraged to remain. So that's one big issue. And I think if we have more role models in STEM, I think it will encourage more girls, even at the early age, to want to be like such role models.
I see. So apart from role models, what do you think that will encourage more women to pursue STEM subjects?
If women will be given subsidies, something that will encourage them to go to school. If, for instance, your parents, like in Africa, your parents can't afford to send you to school, what they usually will do, they'll check how many boys do we have and how many girls do we have. They'll send the male child. That's just the truth. In Africa, they value the male child over the female child. So if they have limited resources, and let's say they have a boy and a girl, and the money they have can only fund just one child, they will send the guy, and the girl will not go to school. So if funding can be released specifically for encouraging girl children from childhood to start, pursuing career in the STEM, I think it's going to go a long way. I'm speaking from the perspective of an African, because I know families whereby they had to wait. My parents just said, it's better you people have just half-baked education. That's, I won't buy you textbook, but let everybody, both male and female. That's just my parents. They struggle to make sure that everyone at least have a taste of education to a certain level. But I know families whereby they had to wait. Well, I have to send my male child. The girl, you just go get married. So I think if there could be funding just tailored towards encouraging more girls to go into the STEM system, it will go a long way to encouraging untapped potential. I've seen a little girl who they give, because back home when I was in Nigeria, I was volunteering with Slum to School. A little girl who they just gave computer for the first time. She was from the slums. And, the way the small girl was going through the computer, you would think that she has had access to computer before. So you can imagine someone who has never seen the walls of education being able to be that smart with a computer. Imagine if that talent has been tapped right from when she was a little girl and allowed to go through school. So people in the slums in Nigeria don't have access to education. So the Slum to School is an NGO that goes to the slum and picks these talents and fund them through to university. So such NGOs could rise up and just go in and encourage little girls to go to school by funding them.
So, we are finishing the interview. Do you have something else that you want to say that we didn't talk about, or any last words?
But just any last words, just to any girl child out there who has dreams, who has hopes, who has aspirations, who have limited resources. I am just a typical example of someone who had limited resources but didn't allow my dream to die because of such limited resources. I pushed, and I didn't allow discouragement. I didn't allow the fact that I'm a woman. You're a woman, just go and focus on getting married. I've had that a lot. But I didn't allow such comments to deter me. Don't allow your background, your situation to deter you. Search, try your best, study the little that you can. Any paper you can get across, just keep reading, keep doing that thing. And the sky will just be the starting point for you. Basically, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you too.